Okay, perfect. All right. Sorry about that. So, yeah, I'm going to be talking about some previous projects, which basically are key to basically where we are today. And I'm going to be talking about a proposal and what we can do together to help with the acceleration even more for the future. All right. So the Arabic speech and language processing research has achieved great results that enabled quite interesting and new exciting applications in the last 20 years. And I'm going to talk about some of the projects which I was involved in and where I saw basically great traction. My first project, my personal first project I was working on is Webmobile. Webmobile was a large interdisciplinary language technology project. It started in '93 in Germany. There was like, I don't remember, like I think 160 or so scientists which are involved in it. Germany invested about 100, I mean, Germany, the research arm, the BMBF, as well as some industry partners invested into this project, altogether about 150 million Deutschmark. So that's $75 million into that project. And while there's other projects which we're running basically in parallel, that is, I mean, quite key in terms of adoption of some of the technologies. So for example, you might know that in the mid-90s, late 90s, statistical translation systems took over the market and compared to symbolic-based machine translation. So this was one of the key thing. Most of the researchers which grew up in this project ended up being in the US and so forth. So basically they went into other locations because one of the shortcomings of BMBF at that point was they didn't continue with follow-up projects. So scientists ended up going where the money is, where funding of research is happening. And I would say, I don't remember, I don't know the official numbers, but I would say that 70% of my friends ended up being in the US, for example, because there's funding and R&D and all of that. And you see them in companies like IBM, Google, Amazon, and other companies. So the job of that conference was to translate spontaneous speech robustly from German to English and back, and German to Japanese and back. So it basically started with an application. We wanted to generate a system which can do the real-time translation on the phone where no human is in the loop. So that's my first project. Then another project which I was involved in, and others here as well, I think, is TIDES, where it was an ambitious technology development effort funded by DARPA. It stands for Translingual Information Detection, Extraction, and Summarization. Also started with the application on trying to make information accessible across different languages to the user. So basically answering questions. Another which I was involved with was Transtech. Transtech was about translation speech for mobile. Webmobile was on the phone, where you can use. Here it has to be a can carry it in your pocket. Interesting project, and DARPA has, of course, interest in this. And there's a lot of research which happened there, which ended up helping commercial businesses across different areas to further the research or further the technology, the state of the art. Companies which were involved here, or organizations which were involved here, are IBM and CMU. Later in the game, Raytheon or BBN started as well. It was groups of teams which basically learned how to work with each other. Another very important big project was GALE. GALE stands for Global Autonomous Language Exploitation. Idea was to take textual as well as broadcast information and make it searchable, make it translated, and so forth. And I like this project not only because of the task, but also on the way on how it was evaluated. So instead of using word error rates or blur scores, people worked backwards from the task at hand, the actual application, and said, okay, you know what, we don't need necessarily all the translations to be only done by humans. We need to just be able to figure out that 80% of the content is recognized or translated in a certain quality. Everything else should actually be touched and tested by a human. So that was a great, for me, a great learning there. BOLT comes after. Again, here it stands for Broad Operational Language Translation, and had the goal to create the project was very grandiose when it started. So first, we wanted to be able to translating multiple foreign languages in multiple genres, doing retrieval, and enable bilingual communication. The beginning of the project, it was actually that we wanted to have a robot which we can communicate in multiple languages, tell it to do something, and it would do something. And if it doesn't understand what you're requesting from it, that it asks back, converse with you in an intelligent way to basically fill the gaps semantically so that it can actually act on what you requested. But during the project, we simplified the project a little bit because that was a very lofty goal, actually. So that was BOLT. So one of the things which I think is important for all these projects is that they work backwards from the application, actually. We had our own R&D goals, word error rate of speech recognition always down, blur score of machine translation always up, F scores, etc. But we were always looking in these projects about what does it mean for the use case? What does it mean for the application? Which was important. So all these projects, and also another component is that collaboration is super critical. I mean, we always think about a problem from one perspective as scientists, and we need to solve a bigger problem. We have a bigger scope to cover. And we need multiple diverse scientists to come together to work with that. To be able to do these successful competitions, I think we need three major components. One is resources, obviously. So resources come in different ways: data, tools, and people. And if one of these is missing, it's not going to work. Also very important is the task alignment, the definition of the task, the definition of what is the metric which we want to optimize to, and what are the benchmarks which we want to utilize. And then also critical is that we have diverse stakeholders in these competitions. The stakeholders cannot be from academia, and then academia basically works on it. I mean, it can, but then it stays within a certain scope. And if it's not adopted, by someone outside academia, it's going to be not as strong as when if other stakeholders are involved. So academia and industry and policymakers probably should sit around the table to solve for some of these competitions. So I love this workshop in particular because because we have actually shared tasks in the heart of what we're doing here. So we have the Quran question answering shared task, and we have the Arabic hate speech shared task. So we define basically we define basically a competition be part of the actual effort which we are doing here, which is great. Obviously, for Arabic, it's not the only shared task. So we see that other shared tasks exist, like Nadi and Madar and Qalb and so forth. So this is going to be, this is very good to see that these shared task competitions are starting to pop up, and we can collaborate on certain things, which is beautiful. From my perspective, I see that some of them are, easier to adopt or easier for me to grasp or and see the immediate value for, the more closer they are into the application. So hate speech, the application is relatively straightforward. Quran Q&A, also relatively straightforward. Something where there is many applications to, but maybe they are not explicitly defined is, for example, dialect identification. It's an important component, but usually there is one more step coming after the dialect identification. Why do I care about that? So I think it's good to think in terms of application what these shared tasks could be. Other workshops have a similar thing. So successful competitions need resources, tasks, and diverse stakeholders, and the applications. So I think that's very important. So how could this cooperation look like? So we have industry and policymakers. So at the end of the day, we are developing science for a certain reason. We're not developing science, we're not doing any research just for the sake of research, just for writing papers. Usually there is one step further, which we are thinking about. So policymakers in industry should tell us what these tasks might be, or we can suggest to them, and they basically come back with an idea. And they should be able to define benchmark, define the task, define the benchmarks, and define the metrics. That would be, in a perfect world, the best way. And then they should actually be able to give us data, and then we will have everything needed so that we can actually do our magic and build tools, have people involved in it, and so forth. Reality is unfortunately not as, oops, that should have been the slide before. So reality is, it's challenging. It's not as easy as this, unfortunately. One is, for example, to define a task and find the appropriate metric requires a scientist. And oftentimes industry doesn't have it. And oftentimes policymakers don't have it unless they have scientists in their ranks. So to make it better, we actually need, so this is why you see these gray arrows here from academia and industry, like the scientist community, basically, back to these task alignments and so forth. So if policymakers in industry cannot do that job, we need to help them find that or do it. At the end of the day, it should actually come from these parties, but they will need the community's help with defining the benchmarks and defining the tasks and defining the metrics, etc. And also the data. Oftentimes we have they have a certain amount of data, but might need extra labeling, for example, or they might not have the data, and we need to help them with finding that data, sourcing the data for them, or suggest ideas where to source the data from. And then if that's all given, then we can do. So we talked about data. This is, we have, the other challenge with the data is, of course, sometimes industry has the data, but can't share it because of privacy, because of ownership, because of policies. Maybe it's also hard to source. So there is that challenge, and we can help. Sometimes we can help by basically finding data from the community. We can actually develop that data for the task, or build some kind of artificial data which is close to what the industry wants, for example. That would be one approach. Of course, then the resulting research. So if industry, for example, supports with data, they will ask, okay, the tools generated or the models which are generated coming from these data, who owns those? And that discussion is as old as AI is, or even older. And we continue with these discussions. But I think more and more the community, the industry, and the policymakers are starting to understand that we are stronger when we share. We are stronger when we share certain ownership, etc. So this is a good action or good movement which I can see in the recent past. All right. So a proposal I have is we need, to solve some of these challenges, we need to basically find a platform where we can put the data on for the industry, for example, where they feel safe that no one is going to steal the data, for example. And that's basically where we are building Explain for, so that we don't own anything as Explain. We want basically have a independent third party where data can be put on, so that the scientist community can actually build their models from without needing to download or deal with the data directly. So this is one thing, but also we have stakeholders of that sort, industry and policymakers, which are engaged with us, and they are having interesting problems. They can't handle it. They can't deal with the diverse problems they have, and the community is there and looking for interesting problems to solve. So this is I would like us to collaborate together to solve some of these problems, which translates into more competitions and more things, but they come from the application side rather than from a core technology perspective. I would like us to help to facilitate with the task definition and the metrics, and that needs to be done together with the community. We can't do that just the industry. We can't do that just Explain for sure. We need to hold our hands together for this. And as I said, Explain wants to host resources safely, which means data stays in terms of ownership with the owner. With their respective owners, models the same, and tools. And Explain wants to facilitate and support actually with the financial framework, which means my idea is that one of the reasons which we established Explain is I want us to have academics do business even without needing the industry, so to say. So we have models in academia which are beautiful and great, The only way to get them basically into the application today is by making them open source and waiting for someone to basically find it and use it. And when like industry basically supports it and funds it, then basically a specific single entity has that access. I believe that if we have like some kind of framework where we have a marketplace, we can put models in there and everyone can use them whenever they want, and the owner is benefiting from that financially. I think that's going to help the scientist community having a bigger impact in all these applications which are out there. What motivated me to do all this? So there is this project which is called Ego 4D, which when I was at Facebook we started actually, and we did exactly that kind of thing. I mean, this is a different use case. So the use case here is for wearable devices, for glasses, to be an interface to the world around you, and be able to do. I mean, if you talk to an agent, that you can, to an assistant, that you can utilize visual signals, you can understand the world around you, and the assistant being much more intelligent than just using voice. So to do so, we defined a project, Ego 4D, and engaged universities, many universities. So the result of this is Ego 4D is a massive scale egocentric data set of unprecedented diversity. It consists of 3,600 hours of video collected by close to 1,000 unique participants in 74 worldwide locations, and in 9 different countries. The project brings together 88 researchers in international consortium to dramatically increase the scale of egocentric data publicly available by an order of magnitude, making it more than 20 times bigger than any other data set in terms of hours of footage. So the benchmarks which we defined here were things like episodic memory, something where the task is, I forget my coffee mug somewhere, I need to be able to remember. So I need to be able to ask a question, where did I forget this? Or did I pay my parking meter? Or any of those kind of questions, so to say, working backwards from an application again. Then we have eye-hand coordination, like understanding basically how hands interact with objects, social tasks, what do you call that? Forecasting. So, and forecast, if you have a certain activity you're doing, forecasting what is the next step you're gonna do, etc. So what I'm trying to get to here is we defined basically a framework, and now we have benchmarks, and they're gonna continue for the next probably 20 years working on these kinds of projects from here, but worked always backwards from the application. The application is wearable devices with cameras built in, and certain tasks which are defining that. So it would be beautiful to find a similar framework for Arabic language things. So this is basically my dream. I mean, it should be a discussion, it should be a collaboration. I'd like us to be, so what Facebook is here for the community, I would like us to support the community to come up with all kinds of magical ideas, and like to help with the infrastructure here. That's my proposal. So feedback.
Thank you, Dr. Hassan. Any question or feedback from remote participants?
So we have Karim raising hand. We have also in the room a couple of hands raised. Is it okay, Jack, as well? So maybe we should start with Karim.
Thank you for the talk. I just had a quick question. I mean, how do you foresee, like, for example, Bolt and Gale and so forth were kind of sponsored by DARPA and supported by LDC, and there were large organizations standing behind them. I mean, how do you foresee things moving forward? I mean, if we want to coalesce, I know there's SIG Arab and there's other organizations that we're trying to build. But sponsorship or institutional support, where do you foresee that this would come from?
That's a very good question, actually. I think some of the industry partners. So one of the experiences we had at Pi School, the School of AI in Rome, was actually industry is interested in funding some of that research, but they don't know how, and they need a vehicle to be able to do so. So I think industry as well as policymakers might actually be interested in like putting in and contributing to the funding of some of these that institutions, that research. Sorry. Is it gonna be enough? Is it going to be enough? I don't know. I mean, it depends at the end of the day on the task, how we can actually get the interest of these potentially funding resources in. I know that for Pi School, the funding is enough. It covers, it costs plus even, and I think for the Arab for the tasks in and around Arabic language, I think there is ways. We just need to basically package it right and have a person or have an institution which is basically dealing with the business side, so to say, of that process and collecting, organizing, building the logistics for the community. I mean, funds are there. We just need to find them and pull them out.
Thank you, Hassan. Actually, my question was asked by Kelly. I will extend it a little bit.
Yeah.
To me, the size of the research community, Arabic is now increasing as we see, but still small. So it's very timely within maybe 1 or 2 or 3 years to do something so that we enable faster research after that. But to implement your idea, I would suggest maybe a use case scenario where we can collaborate, all or most of us collaborate on something, and we showcase to somebody to sponsor the
Yeah, that's a very good idea. So maybe we can actually look at what is industry interested in, for example, and find maybe a couple tasks to pull into the community and say, hey, this is what industry is looking in. Why don't we put our hands together and try to do something and define that task, find the right industry and policymakers which actually are be helping us be the echo, how do you call that, the mirror to figure out, are we doing the right thing or are we doing research just independent of that? Yeah. Jack.
Yeah, Jack from CJK Dictionary Institute in Japan. So I was just I may have missed some of what you said. I just wanted to know what are the practical steps to take. So it's something you know to
No, it's a proposal. I mean, if I see that there is a good response, I think we should make a website and define that, maybe build some kind of board of sorts, and then then go from there. So this is just a proposal. I just basically put it out there now. This is basically just a seed. We need to build it then.
Working?
Yes.
Hello? Yeah, so I would be interested in contributing because we are developing very large scale Arabic lexicons for speech technology. They're already being used by speech technology. So I think there's some room for collaboration. So when the time comes, I'd just like to know what to do.
Sounds good.
How to do it. Yeah.
I know you guys were actually quite long time with the Chinese and Japanese and Korean that CJK work.
We still are. CJK is our main
Business. Got
We're
it.
doing more work in Arabic now.
Sounds good. Sounds good. Sounds good.
So for the sake of time, last question.
Thank you, Hassan. So I think I saw a previous version of your talk before, so I didn't ask any more questions, but I want to reiterate what Kareem had said about the role of SIG Arab. We already have a board. It has about 20 people who've been very active in Arabic NLP. A lot of them are in the Arab world, and I think this is really important to try to bring home, because there are other issues that also, kind of we're forgetting about, right? We do have a major brain drain problem. A lot of people working in this area almost either are in the West or have to do the tax of being in the West for some time before they can actually return back to the Arab world. It would be great to link these efforts to governments. I know you've been very active doing the tours, and really appreciate what AIXplain is doing. But I think linking it with the researchers, I mean, you mentioned that. I would like to offer, we should talk, as SIG Arab representative here, and maybe try to cook up something and go to some of the big government funders in the area. I mean, do you imagine we can get government money from multiple places to work together? I mean, that would be an incredible dream.
Yes,
right?
yes,
exactly,
yes.
right? Get them to unite on something for change. All right, so that's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. No, SIG Arab is actually a great step. It's relatively young still. And it's a good, but it's moving actually more from the science side. And I think what we need to pull in is the application side.
I'd like to imagine SIG Arab, like what you're seeing is the tip of an iceberg that is about 10 years old, because OSACT and the NLP were the origins of it, and those happening would be.
Agreed. Yep.
Thank you, Dr.
Thank you.
Hassan.